Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us in this edition of TeaTechnique Editorial Conversations. We're here to discuss Book 2, Chapter 2, Introductions to Yixing Teapot. Joining me here today is Patrick Penny.
Hey, hey.
And Zongzun Li.
Hello, 大家好.
Well, everyone, this is our first content-driven chapter. My first question is we talk about the complexity of Yixing and how Yixing is not a single topic, but it's actually a topic area that intersects with mineralogy and geology. It intersects with artistic practices and designs and motifs. It interacts with the historical development of China and its merchant economy. And it interacts with methods of knowledge, the idea of what is true, what is real, what is valuable. So my first question, and really this is a lifelong question, is how do you know what's true?
Well, I'm prescient and can see the end of time, so I just work everything backwards in a line to the modern day and make my decisions on what's true, knowing how the world will ultimately end.
A negative Boltzmann brain capable of reversing entropy.
Waves. Well, first you need to know what's not true, right? That will be a baseline to start. And then you explore.
And can you use things that you know or that are not true in order to reject sources? Or one of the things that I think that we find very frequently here in the topic of Yixing is that individuals, either historical or contemporary, publish things that are partially true or have some version of the real and the hyper real mixed together. And so how do we go about parsing out what information from them we can trust?
Yeah, it's hard. There's a lot of gray space, right? So as you said, there's so much partial truth. It can be dangerous to outright reject anything from, like let's say a said author that you see one thing that you think is incorrect and therefore you don't trust anything else they say. I think you have to take everything into its context and try and parse through that. And that's, I think, where a lot of the real work is, and probably where a lot of the work that you had to do for this book, Jason, laid within discovering the partial truths from the falsities that lie within. So I think it's about, trying to validate portions of that truth from other sources, right? Seeing that other trusted sources are making the same, or let's say claims that are close to these partial truths. I think it's about having, a collection of these sources that say, that are stating what is said to be the truth. It's not so much about having a, let's say, a populist mindset on what is true, but it's a good starting point to see that, trusted sources say that this is a fact. From there, I think you have to put it to the test, right? So some things are easier to test, right? When it comes to Yixing and teapots, there are things that you can get your hands on, right? And actually test and know. And then there's things that are much harder, and maybe for specific, mineral structures within the Yixing teapots and their pores, you need to wait for the right research institution to do that research, right? Or if you have the funds, fund it yourself. So, while some things are much easier to pursue in truth, some things will take time, money, a lot of resources.
So that's exactly one of the ways that we think about going about it, right? Is we start from first principles and we start to build up on topics and areas of trustable and verifiable information from outside of Yixing specifically. So we'll build up on geology and lithology, where we'll look at what are the depositional characteristics of ore, how are ores processed into clays, what are the resulting ceramic crystalline structures, what are the proportions of those structures, and what are the resulting characteristics of those known from industry and ethnography and archaeology, I should say, and other types of work. And then which of those means of knowledge or ways of knowing can we then apply to Yixing? And so frequently what we'll see is that individuals will be subject matter expertise in something. They'll have subject matter expertise in artistic practices and history of Yixing use and development. But then they'll talk about something dealing with pore structures and crystalline matrices, right? And it'll just obviously be wrong if you've done first principles research on this. And so do you say, well, this person doesn't know what they're talking about? Of course not, right? They have subject matter expertise, and sometimes that subject matter expertise generalizes or something. Sometimes it doesn't generalize. So you have ways of knowing. And one of the most difficult things in the topic of Yixing, something that even I did not appreciate before starting to write this book, is how few of these ways of knowing interact, right? Before this, all three of us from the Institute, we had quite a bit of knowledge and experience using antique teapots. We had quite a bit of knowledge and experience in brewing practices. We had quite a bit of knowledge and experience in even tasting and pairing and thinking through what teas are going to go with what Yixing. But we had no near the level of experience, despite having had some background knowledge on different types of clays and different formations, right? We had no idea about clay and ceramic processing, different crystalline structures, different porosity levels, different surface textural attributes of different clays. And if someone said, well, Zongzun, what's the difference between Luni surface texture and its expected and resulting characteristics on tea versus Duani, maybe you could have given a semi-reasonable answer. But most likely you would have said, oh, I don't know. I really haven't used lots of Luni and haven't really thought about surface texture and surface texture effects. But really, that's the next question.
Yes, Luni, as stated in its name, is supposed to be a little green.
Answer complete.
That's the key difference. I'm totally kidding. You should find out the answer in the book.
Yes, read on to find out.
And so one of the things that's the goal of this book is in constructing these different ways of knowing is understanding where and how they intersect in the topic of Yixing. And then from that, creating testable hypotheses. And many of our hypotheses that we've created have already been invalidated. And so, we talk about waiting for a research institute to do certain things. The one that was the most hopeful one is defunct, so we won't wait on them. But we are working on self-funding much of this research, whether that's radiographic testing or hydrogen-based porosity testing, things that remain food safe, so not mercury-based testing, looking at total absorptive properties and characteristics and crystalline matrices of the Yixing teapots. So just as a reminder, please like, subscribe, and promote the book to fund that first-party research. As far as we know, we're likely to be the only group doing it with a mix of contemporary wares and antiques. The book is built up continuously on layers of first principles in order to get to the point where we can say holistically that this information has been verified. Here are the scientific tests to prove that they've been verified. And a lot of that work, some of it is done. We've invalidated some theories. Some of it is ongoing, and more will be visible in the second half of the book.
Yeah, just to wait in on one of the points that Jason made about field expertise within the realm of Yixing, that has been quite an obvious phenomenon as we start to examine different resources, books, publications from different aspects about Yixing. Some books, some resources are more specialized into the mineral content. Some others are more specialized into the shape or the production skill of Yixing. And when we are trying to verify some of the truths, we always cross-reference between, these resources. And sometimes we find alignment, sometimes we find misalignment, which are where the fun starts, right? So in the books, we are going to talk about a lot of the, ongoing rumors about, Yixing, production or Yixing teapot, the shape, or the origin of the clay. Is some of the clay still exist? For example, the very famous one that's called Yixing Li. There are a lot of things to go over in this book.
And Zongzun, you had worked with Jason in kind of translating, right, some of the material that was used to, help write this book. And so you're able to read a lot of the Chinese language original texts on Yixing. What are you hoping to also learn, from this book, since you can read a lot of the material that is not accessible to many, people in the American tea brewing community or the Western tea brewing community? What do you hope that Jason kind of does different in this book? What are you hoping to get out of it that is new or not available to you, in a Chinese language format on Yixing?
Right. So be able to read Chinese is both a blessing and a curse, because, you have access to so many information, but at the same time, unfiltered information, right? A lot of the resources that you can find online or offline can be false, can be modified, and you always have to come in with a more critical mindset when examining all these materials. So it's not just me. There are a lot of people, friends in the tea world, experts, offline institutions. I even went to Yixing myself, the city, and to get some firsthand access to some ores, be able to take pictures, be able to talk to studios and artists. And those are super useful firsthand information and knowledge that we can that we can acquire, and we use that to validate or challenge on some of the information we have studied, and also to ask new questions.
That gets me excited because unlike you, Zongzun, who's kind of helped with the reference material for this book, I think I'm going to be learning along with the reader. So I'm really excited to go and kind of see what you guys have discovered. Jason, what you've synthesized from both this first, hands-on research and the reference text you guys have gone through. I obviously, like you guys, prior to writing this book, come from the background of just using teapots, Jason, as you explained. So for Jason, for someone whose background is, they have been practicing tea for a while, they've had their hands on a solid amount of teapots. This overview, I think, gives a little bit of a look into what we're going to see. But what do you think is going to be most practical in this book? Let's say if we looked at it, not even chapter by chapter, but if you were going to pick 2 or 3 chapters to highlight for the average practitioner who is using Yixing, what is going to be the most impactful thing to learn that they can use within their practice?
The chronological order for where it appears in the books, it would be one, learning and understanding the different types of clays. There are quite a bit of both misinformation and then generalizations and just outright misinformation about the types of clays. With people talking about there is 3 types of clays. It's Zisha, Juni, and Duani. Wait, actually Zisha is all of the clays, and it's Zini. And also you forgot about Hongni, and you forgot about Luni. And then also there's sometimes black clays. Those exist, or is that a processing technique called wuhui, right? So all sorts of mass overgeneralizations, and some of the clays are much rarer than people talk about just because they never caught on. Some of the clays are much less rare than people talk about. They're just stockpiled. So I think that's the first one. The second one is understanding how to characterize Yixing teapots. So I think a lot of people are very good at brewing in Yixing teapots, and I think a lot of people are pretty good at pairing Yixing teapots. I think there's probably less exploration in pairing than there should be, and the generalizations are, as I'll continuously harp on, are overgeneralizations, right? You use Duani only for Longjing, or you use Duani only for whatever. But so much of that actually depends on specific subtypes of the clays, firing rates, and thinking through, what does it mean for this specific clay? If I'm using an antique wood-fired Duani that was originally developed as export ware for Japan, right? That's for Senchido. That is very obviously a green tea pairing if you've been read into that type of knowledge, right? But is all Zini the same? Obviously not. You can't just make generalizations. Use Zini for oolong. That doesn't even make sense, right? Zuni is a range and oolong is a range, and so really thinking through the characterizations of Yixing and understanding when to apply their effects on the tea, and if those effects are going to be consistent or not. The last point is validation, understanding what you have, understanding what it is, right? Whether you're part of the F1 fan club or the Shipwreck Yixing fan club, or simply buying Qing Dynasty wares, really understanding what you have, understanding how to evaluate claims, and being able to move with, I wouldn't say confidence, please don't buy expensive things with confidence from a book, right? But at least to having a framework for thinking through what vendors are promoting and telling you.
So it sounds like through those 3 points, that is the applicable framework for collection and use, right? That you state in this last paragraph of this chapter that we're on. So you kind of go as far to say it's not a beginner's guide or a how-to manual, right? Just like all the other books you're going to write. But this will at least provide a framework for approaching both utilization, understanding, and purchasing of Yixings.
Let's see if I survive writing this book before we promise any future books. But this book has been so much harder to write than expected. I mean, we're starting publication, I don't know, 4 months after I thought we would be. And the first half of the book is very written. The second half of the book, a lot of pending experiments and data to come back and to compile. And so we have frameworks. We know that we're going to be able to publish this all this year, but I mean, this is they're coming to take me away.
Because you didn't write the book fast enough.
I didn't write the book fast enough. That's my editors and publishers coming.
Yeah, I put in a hot tip. They're coming for you, bud. But I think by now our listeners know the sounds of New York pretty well.
Yeah, this is definitely a journey together. We spent so many time to try to debunk, what's not knowledge, and we spent even more effort, in trying to find out what might be knowledge. And of course, the ground truth is always open to debate. So please, after reading the book, send us your comments, send us your feedback. And if you have new information, please let us know. If you have questions about the information, please also let us know.
Jason, do you promise we will know what is truth by the time we finish reading this book?
We will all have the enlightened Boltzmann brain after finishing this book and properly executing a single brew of tea in a shipwreck Yixing tea.
Just tea? Not just any tea?
Yeah.
And you can go to any auctions and buy a Shidabing with confidence.
And pair it with your, Tongqing Hao, your antique Tongqing Hao, or your even, 1960s Hongyan if you're not feeling as baller that day.
Nice. Well, I think that gives everyone a pretty good idea of what's coming. The one thing that I will say in addition to that is, we don't take our position in writing this lightly. We remain open to the idea that we are going to get some things wrong, and readers are going to point out somewhere where we've made an assessment or a generalization or a mistake. And so one of the things we do is we constantly are working to test ourselves. And we're doing that both with amassing a much larger collection of Yixing. And in fact, one of the ways that we've tested ourselves very recently is commissioning a Yixing out of clay that we've tested and ore that we've tested. And so our initial results are quite good. We might share more about that in future editorial conversations. But we do, one of the things I want to promote is that we do take that super seriously. And if we can't, evaluate clay and create something that we like, that wins in blind taste tests versus other contemporary Yixing pots, or hopefully starts to near some of the effects that we're able to see on some of our more verified antiques, right? Then we wouldn't have the expertise to write this book. So may or may not catch a glimpse of that in the future. We're working on that. We're working on a few other surprise projects as well.
Amassing Yixings, such a struggle. Somebody's got to do it though, Jason. Thanks for taking one for the team.
It's using up a non-negligible portion of my expendable income.
Yeah, what's that shelf full of Yixings I see behind you? That's new. Did you just get that?
With that, thank you everyone for joining us in this edition of TeaTechnique Editorial Conversations. We'll be back in approximately 1 or 2 weeks with the next chapter, Myths and Complications.